that was quite a lot of material to go through. I think we now know enough to start creating Bethany SpyShop, and that is what we will do in the next demo. We'll set up the application starting from the empty template. We're now finally ready to start building our application, and we're going to do that in this demo. I'm going to start by creating a new project from scratch. To really do that, to start from scratch, that is, I'm going to start from the empty template, the ASP.NET Core empty, that is. This will give me the opportunity to explain everything step by step and not rely on the magic created by the templates. So let us create our application, and it's going to be called Bethany SpyShop. It's going to be a .NET 6 application, and I'm going to use HTTPS for that. Let's create the application. One small side step, I will be writing quite a lot of code. I hope you're following along with everything I'm doing in this course, but of course there's going to be points at which there's a lot of typing involved. That is why, for each module, you will find snippets. Snippets contain the code, the large blocks of code that are used throughout the demos. And you can find one here for every module. You simply open that text file and you can copy the large blocks of code that I'm using as well. This applies for all modules throughout the entire course. Alright, back to our application. As you can see, there's a little bit less items in my newly generated project compared to what we did when we ran the MVC template. There's still a program file, the properties folder containing the launch settings is still there, the dependencies are still there, and the app settings has also been generated. But all the other folders, they're not there anymore, and neither is the www folder. So we need to bring all of that back into our application as well. Now let's first look at the program.cs. The program.cs, as already mentioned in the slides, is a super important file when running our application or executing our application, that is. This is the file that will really launch the application. As you can see, there's no class, there's no static void main. This is going to execute as a console application, but we don't see the typical things we'd expect here, like that static void main inside of class program. That is because the program.cs is using top-level statements. That's a default since .NET 6. You can still include that program and that static void main, but it's not required. There can be one file and only one file that uses top-level statements in your applications. Let's now look at the code here. First, we see the web application.createBuilder. That will already apply a lot of defaults for our application. This will, amongst others, make sure that our application at startup looks at the app-settings.json file and loads the settings from that file. It will, for example, look at the default log settings in the app settings file. It will also make sure that Kestrel is included and set up IIS integration. Another default applied by CreateBuilder is that the www folder will be the folder to contain static content. Now, these are all defaults and you can change them, but honestly, for most applications that I use and build, I have never had to change these defaults. So we are good here. We can already rely on what's there. Now, the builder will also give us access to the services collection, and that services collection, that is the collection of services that we register with the dependency injection system of ASP.NET Core. Now, let us try and adding a first service here. I'm going to go to Builder, and as said, it gives me access to the services collection, so builder.services, and on that services, I can use a number of methods. ASP.NET Core comes with a lot of extension methods. As you can see here, you can also see that they're extension methods because of the little down arrow. I can here add controllers with views. Add controllers with views will make sure that our application knows about ASP.NET Core MVC. As mentioned in the slides, by default, ASP.NET Core applications really don't know a lot. The services collection is kept as empty as possible. By including the add controllers with views, I'm bringing in framework services that enable MVC in my application. You'll see me do that for other frameworks later on in the application as well. We can and will add more services, many more services that is, to this services collection. Once the builder.build is called, well, then our application instance is really ready. We can now use that app instance to bring in multiple middleware components. The middleware components build up what is known as the middleware request pipeline. By default, the app.mapget is really a middleware component that listens for an incoming request to the root of the application and will then return hello world. So when we send a get, we will get back hello world at this point. Now, that's not really a useful application. That's not what we want to build. We want to build that nice looking application for Bethany. So I'm going to remove this line here and I'm going to bring in other middleware components myself. Make sure that when you do this, you place them behind the .build statement, but before the app run. Okay, let's add a middleware component. I'm going to bring in support for returning static files. This middleware component is pre-configured to look for incoming requests for static files, such as a JPEG or a CSS file, and it will look in that default configured folder www.root for that static file and return it. It will then also short-circuit the request. Now, through development, I also want to see errors inside of my executing application. It will be of great help to see what we did wrong. And to do that, I can use the app.use developer exception page middleware. That is again a middleware component, a diagnostic middleware component that will now always show the exception page. But it's called the developer exception page. It may contain, well, secret information that we don't want our users to see. It's called the developer exception page after all. We can in fact surround this with an if statement. I can check if the application is currently running in development mode, in development environment, I should say. And if that is the case, well, then I'm going to use that developer exception page. If you're running in another environment, well, then we shouldn't display this page. We can see by going to the properties of our application in which environment we are currently. If we go to Properties, Debug, and we click on this Open Debug Launch Profiles UI here, then we indeed see that our application currently is in the development environment. There's a known environment variable called ASP.NET Core Environment that we can use to change that to, for example, production or staging. Now there's another piece of middleware I need to add, and that is the ability to be able to navigate to our pages, to in fact make sure that ASP.NET Core will be able to handle incoming requests correctly. We'll see how that works, but I do need to add that middleware already here. Otherwise, we won't see anything, and that's not a good idea either. So I'll add app.map default controller route. This will set again some defaults used typically in MVC to route to the pages that we are going to have. I shouldn't in fact say pages, I should actually say views. This is really endpoint middleware, and I do place it at the end. That's important because this will enable our application to let MVC handle incoming requests on controllers. And that's what we need here. And this may seem a bit confusing. I do understand that. Don't worry about that. Just know that this is there to make sure that we can see our pages then. And then we have the app run, and that will really start our application. We already have a working application. Let's look at it by clicking here on the play button. And we get a 404. That's a bit disappointing. Well, I think it's actually rather normal that we don't see anything here yet. We don't have any page just yet. But that'll change in the next module.